Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. As we continue kicking through the detritus of the 2021 season, I figured we'd try and change it up a little bit and have an outside voice come in. We have Kevin Clark from The Ringer, one of the smartest, funniest, most plugged in, and intelligent writers on the NFL beat. So Kevin Clark's going to give some insight on a couple of different topics, but it's all fascinating. Enjoy. No further ado, we bring in the great Kevin Clark. You can find him on Twitter at @ByKevinClark, formerly at the Wall Street Journal. He's been at The Ringer forever, and he is one of the most entertaining, well-read, and enjoyable people covering the NFL. How you doing, my guy?
I'm doing great. Just trying to keep my head above water. The Monday night playoff game, maybe too much. The 7th seed, maybe too much, but it's playoff football, so I can't complain.
I'm with you on that. I mean, I'm happy to have the extra football. I'd rather have the extra football than not. But when you look back at the rout fest that was this particular weekend, which we will get to and look forward to the next weekend, you say, boy, that wasn't real competitive. But you could gamble on blowouts too, Kev.
Some people said to me, but it's the same thing you have in college now, which is you learn there's just not a lot of good football teams, right? It's the same thing you guys learned in New England for the past 20 years is not a lot of teams can play with good teams.
It's really interesting how often the Patriots went into playoff games, whether they were playing your Jacksonville Jaguars back in 2006. Or like they're trying
the amount of Florida teams, because I'm from Orlando, people will just throw a Florida team at me as my team, depending on when it's convenient. I can be someone can brand me a Dolphins fan, a Bucks fan. I am an Orlando Magic fan. If the Orlando Magic make the Super Bowl, I will root for them in the Super Bowl.
See, that's it. A Magic fan. We could get into that too, but we're not going to, because first what I want to get into is an outside perspective of the Patriots. You pay attention to all of it. You talk to a lot of people. The Patriots here, people are still shell-shocked at the result from last weekend. What was your appraisal of the Patriots season and Saturday night?
On the whole, I was hugely impressed with what the Patriots were able to do with Mac Jones this rookie year. I think PFF had him as the 5th graded rookie quarterback in their grading scale, above even Justin Herbert, who's the golden child of the analytics community. So that's something to take note of. But a loss like that is so, I don't want to say catastrophic, but it brings into question so many things about the franchise. I mean, guys like J.C. Jackson, who we all thought was a legitimate superstar, gave up something like 98 yards, led all players on the Patriots in yards given up. The fact that Josh Allen was able to be 10 for 10, he went full Christian Laettner on us. He went 10 for 10 on deep passes over 10 yards. I mean, that's really bad. That's a failure at every single level. Mac Jones did not improve as the season goes along. I don't know what that is. I think, Tom, you had a great column about this, about how the Patriots keep fading. I think maybe with the 17th game in particular, there's maybe more of a rookie wall, especially for a guy like Mac who didn't play a lot in college. It's such a physical thing. You just worry that maybe over the course of the season, his body was just adjusting to it all. There were conflicting things. Kurt Warner had that comment about how he needs to slow down. Well, PFF also said that he was holding on to the ball too long. So it was just mistake after mistake. And I think a loss to the Bills like that, where they don't make any mistakes, to me, the problem is there's so much talent on that team. And a guy like Matthew Judon was not playing up to his standards in the second half of the season and all that. But when a team like that plays that poorly, it's an energy thing, it's a preparation thing. And that's not the kind of thing I've seen from the Patriots. And that's why I kind of get a sinking feeling in my stomach saying, I mean, what the heck was that? But on the whole, if you look at it week 1 through 19, I'm impressed with what they were able to do in 2021.
And that's the interesting thing. Look, talent is fixable. And sometimes a blowout like that, you can, this shines a light on really that we're inadequate there. This was not a one-off. This was 5 weeks of it. But when you have 5 weeks of inefficiency in terms of penalties taken, pre-snap penalties, too many men on the field, timeouts burned, blocked punts, 2 guys showing up in the same area on a route, those are mechanical operational problems.
Yep.
So I fully believe the Patriots have the wherewithal to shine a light and say, all right, we got to fix that, and that. How do you fix what could be operational problems? And look, Bill Belichick's done it before, but you're always doing it. The vibe of the team has ebbed and flowed over 20 years. It hasn't always been
right,
plucky, all together now. We're all rowing in the same direction. I don't think that this team is dysfunctional. I do think, however, that the players don't have the same guidance, verve, intensity, urgency that they've had in the past, or it's not channeled in the right direction. That's my perspective from up close, because they can fix the X's and O's and the Jimmies and the Joes and all that stuff. But to me, to see them slip, Kevin, was the most, it wasn't just a touchdown every drive against the Bills. They let up 600 yards to the Cowboys. What the hell? What the hell?
That's an interesting point, because you saw the quote from Jacoby Myers saying that basically didn't build on the momentum of the season. And I think that leadership and energy and being ready to go is two-pronged, Tom, and I'm sure you agree. There's a lot the coaching staff can do. There's a lot the assistants can do, but it's also player-driven. I wonder if, listen, there's a million reasons why Tom Brady being on the team was a good thing. But one of them is that in January, he knew how to get these guys ready to go. And obviously, let's exempt the last game he ever played in Foxborough from that particular exercise. But in more times than not, he had his guys ready to go. There were so many leaders on the defense that were in the system for a long time. And maybe, listen, they took a lot of free agents. They had a lot of young players. They had a lot of rookies who were making contributions. And they just didn't understand either January football or how the Patriots operate. You know, one of the best quotes I've ever heard about football is from Bill Walsh. He said, there's no such thing as clutch. It's just go out and do your job in the same way, execute normally while everybody else starts freaking out. That, to me, was always the Patriot way. If you're in New Orleans in 2002, they weren't doing anything crazy with the clutch stuff. They were just executing in the way they know how when the Rams were freaking out and Mike Martz throwing his career away. Let Mike Martz throw his career away. We're going to do our thing, right? That's always the way the Patriots have operated. I think with so many guys new in the system, it's just hard to get on the same page in December, in January. One of the things that Belichick was always so good at, Tom, was being able to time playing your best football in December or January. That's a practice thing. That's a structure thing. And I just think that these guys maybe just didn't know what that looked like until they got the brakes beaten off them.
The funny thing is Bill has made a habit, and I think a lot of coaches around the NFL have adopted it as well. There's so much less hitting and intensity in the offseason that they've started treating September as an extended training camp. Still trying to win the games, but we don't know who we are. Hoping that by December, we're starting to reach our peak. The last 3 years, 6-11 after December 1st, you have an extended training camp at the beginning and a swoon at the end. Well, okay, you kick ass for the
OTAs
in October and November. It's interesting that you present that, because that's something that I'm looking at as well with the team. And again, these are not, I don't think it's dysfunctional. I think it's undefined. When Bill is the greatest defensive mind in football history, but he has to delegate and oversee so much. Who's in charge of the defense? Who's got the title? Even when Matt Patricia had the title, where Brian Flores was the de facto, Bill was involved. Now it's Bill. My understanding is Gerard Mayo holds a bigger role than people understand, but Steven is the game day play caller. Now you have Matt Patricia on the cans up in the booth, and this ambiguity about who's in charge of the defense, while, as you point out, Dante Hightower's back after a year off. Kyle Van Noy's back after a year in Miami. Matthew Judon's new to the program. Christian Barmore's new to the program. Kyle Duggar's in his second year. Patrick Chung had been here, isn't here. There's so much turnover, and there's not a defined leader. There's leaders. You know how hard it is to get shit done in a committee.
I do. Especially over Zoom. But no, I completely agree with you. And I think that there are structural things that Belichick's going to have to look at. I think that when I was talking to people a month ago, the NFL thinks the world of Gerard Mayo. And I watched some interviews with him. I listened to some interviews with him. I wouldn't be surprised. He's obviously getting head coach interest this year. Wouldn't be surprised, certainly, if he's gone by the end of next year. So they just need. Belichick has always been good at developing a bench, right? Like the Seth Wickersham book details that so well about how he was basically able to take these guys who were 23, develop them. We just need some more of that from Belichick. Come up with 5 guys who can run a defense like that, and then on the player side, come up with 5 guys who can be really good at leading and understand what January football is. Maybe Kyle Van Noy, who's been in the system but obviously was out of it for a year. Maybe he takes an even bigger role. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not in that locker room. What I do know is that not being ready to go in January, I've seen Belichick have his guys ready to go, so something's wrong with the locker room.
Yeah, and what's interesting is when you mention that, the bench, speaking to some folks this week, they said, when you have that level of ambiguity, there's no real accountability. And I thought that was a handy phrase that I stuck in my head and I wrote down. But the Ernie Adams departure, the Dante Scarnecchia departure, Ivan Fears may leave this year. These are old line coaches. Some of the guys who are in now, Mike Pellegrino with the defense, Stephen and Brian Belichick, they've been around football for a long time. Just because their last name is Belichick does not negate the fact that they have football acumen. I truly believe that. But there are such young coaches. Cam Acord ran the special teams this year. After a year in 2020 where they were great on special teams, they were a semi-disaster for the Patriots this year. But there's so many young coaches who grew up with Bill Belichick as a demigod that it's hard, I think. And these guys are not lifers. They just are getting going. And I really think that's an issue that the Patriots have to at least scrutinize. How do you fix it? I don't know. These guys aren't magically going to get 15 more years in the system, but Bill has, Mick Lombardi or Stephen and Brian Belichick or Vinny Cincinnati or Pellegrino, who played, lacrosse for a long time. They rise to a level without Bill having done this nationwide search for the next guys to come in.
Hey, listen, and that has worked at stretches for Bill's career. What's interesting to me, Tom,
McDaniels, Dayball, Mangini. I mean, it's a ton.
When you look at Football Outsiders, they do a thing every year called snap adjusted age, which is basically who plays the snaps and who's the oldest team and the youngest team in the league based on who's actually out there. And the Patriots on offense and defense are always, until relatively recently, and maybe this year with the free agents, are always one of the oldest teams in football. And I think in large part, and that's not just Tom Brady because it's on the defensive side of the ball, Belichick likes veteran acumen. He likes smart people out there. He likes people who've seen this before. And it's funny to me that he's built a coaching staff right now in 2022 that doesn't have a lot of veteran presence. You mentioned Ivan Fears. I don't know his status, but that's a guy who's been around a lot. And that's a guy who knows exactly what to tell Bill Belichick. Some of the staff turnover and some of the older guys, Dante Scarnecchia, Ernie Adams, I mean, we know that what he's capable of saying to Bill Belichick. So losing that veteran presence cannot be overstated. We talk so much about veteran presence in the locker room. We don't do nearly enough on the coaching staff to have actual sort of confidants for Belichick. I know he's not exactly going to open up to these guys, but guys who know how to approach things with Belichick, guys who know who know so much about football that Belichick's going to ask them what they think. I mean, I think that there's so much when you get to roster turnover, your coaching turnover that goes unnoticed. And I think I agree with you. We need to be looking a lot more at that.
Yeah, and when we're scrutinizing the 2021 Patriots, the reason we're talking about the coaching staff, and of course, there's always going to be ambiguity to it because it's the players on the field. But when you have the performance at the end of the season that they did, losing 4 out of 5, and the way those losses were achieved or sunk to, it has to land somewhere on what the teachers are sending the students into the test with. You did a great story last week about the coaching cycle and the firing cycle of doom that exists. And the Patriots are a pretty good example of it. We mentioned Mayo, and the reason I think Mayo could be an outlier coach from among the Patriots is all these teams keep hiring or looking at or scrutinizing coordinators who were on the sidelines for playoff games or Super Bowls. And they come in with X's and O's acumen, but they might not have that ability to delegate, that ability to oversee, that ability to bring a culture together, implement a culture. It was an excellent story. What did you find in writing that story, and why did you want to write that story?
It's interesting to me because I wanted to write it because NFL owners haven't gotten any better at hiring in the last 100 years. Like not 1 inch closer to figuring it out from the time they started hiring coaches and
From
GMs.
Connie Mack on through.
Yeah. Connie Mack was a good hire, actually.
That good hire.
That withstood the test of time. But no, it's interesting to me because the Patriots are kind of the way the teams look at them. And by the way, obviously, a lot of guys from the Pats are getting interviews right now for both coach and GM, whether that's Gerard Mayer, Dave Ziegler. But the Patriots are indicative of something, which is that owners look at the teams that have won and said, who's the number 2, or even in some cases, the number 1. And that's not really, there's no evidence to say that that's how you win. In fact, the teams that didn't go to the Super Bowl, a company called Sportsology did crunch numbers for me. The guys who come from teams that don't win a Super Bowl or even make a Super Bowl have a slightly higher winning percentage than the guys who come from teams that have won a Super Bowl or gone to a Super Bowl in the previous 5 years before they're hiring. So there's no evidence that hiring from a winning system works. And you see it in practice. I was in Detroit a bunch, Tom, during the Bob Quinn, Matt Patricia era.
Oh.
And it was miserable. And it was interesting to me because Aqib Talib came on one of my shows a couple weeks ago, and he said that Bill Belichick had almost no rules. And you know this, but I think that he had 3 rules, which was know your stuff, be on time, don't talk to the media, which I don't know how much you love that 3rd rule. That was tough for Aqib to not mess around with the media. But these guys like Matt Patricia go into Detroit and have all sorts of rules, and they totally sweat the small stuff. And it's like, what did you learn from Bill Belichick? Because I think one of the lessons of Bill Belichick is keep the main thing the main thing. No one pays more attention to details than Bill Belichick. From a player perspective, he's not really micromanaging unless you break those 3 rules. So we know with the media, we've heard some anecdotes about that. But when Patricia got in there, he's freaking out over tweets. He's printing them out from what I heard and yelling at people. He is, in some cases, going at reporters and press conferences, presenting himself. In Detroit, nobody in Detroit cares if you come from the Patriot way. So he had to win over the whole city, and he never even attempted to do it. Never. I mean, he didn't do anything. And so these guys coming from New England, I feel like they need to. It's funny. I say this all the time about analytics, but there was an MBA executive at Sloan years ago said something I think about all the time, where he said everybody who takes an analytics class should be forced to take an acting class, because that's what really matters, is being able to communicate and convey and smile and all this stuff, right? If you're a head coach, you better take an acting class as well, because you got to come in and win over a city. You have to win over a franchise. You have to win over an owner, even after the interview process and the hiring. And I kind of feel like sometimes when guys don't do that. Also, I mean, I just think that it gets back to Wickersham's book. There's an anecdote in there after Weiss and Cornell left, where Wickersham asked an executive, "Hey, how is he going to fare without Charlie and Romeo?" And the executive said, "It's all Bill. It's all Bill." And so you get into the coaching staff, who did what did Bill interfere with, especially with Matt Patricia. But then there's also, the personnel side of it. There have been successes. Josh Robinson is good. Jason Light is good. Thomas Dimitroff made a Super Bowl and almost beat the Patriots. So if you're an owner right now, you have to think long and hard about where you're getting your guys from. And it comes down to people. It does not matter where a guy came from. I mean, there are so many successes. Kevin Stefanski laid an egg in his last game in Minnesota and was hired by Cleveland. And people were saying, why did they hire Kevin Stefanski? He laid an egg. He was great. He is great. Sean McVay laid an egg in his last game with Washington. I think he got outdueled by Ben McAdoo. This stuff doesn't matter. We overrate it. And so the reason I wanted to write the article, Tom, was because owners just look at the most obvious thing. Owners honestly look at it no differently than guys on message boards do. Right. About, this guy's a winner, bring him in. You still see it, which is that, we got to bring in this guy because he comes from a winning system. Just relax and find people.
How often do you find yourself when you talk to people in the league, whether it be players, coaches, owners, executives, they do sound like guys on message boards. They hold the same views we do. Everything that we're wondering about as media or fans or whatever kind of observer you are, they have the same conversations. I remember being at the owners meetings 2018 after the Patriots lost the Super Bowl. to the Philadelphia Eagles and having
Mhm.
2 or 3 coaches saying, you won't ask Bill why he sat Mal. You won't ask him. You're afraid. You won't ask him. Why did he do it? You won't ask. It just, they want to know the same things we want to know.
Yeah.
And they have the same perceptions. And it's really interesting the way that goes. We've gone a little longer than anticipated, but I don't care if you don't care.
I'm good.
All right. Let's go forward if we could.
Yeah.
And just take a quick look at this weekend's games, and we'll go right in order. Bengals, Titans. Bengals smoking hot, the most entertaining quarterback in football at this juncture. And I don't think I'm going to get sick of him either. I don't. We get sick of all quarterbacks at some point, but Joe might have a long shelf life.
He's incredibly genuine as a person. And I don't mean that as like he's like charitable or whatever. I'm sure he is. But he just says what's on his mind in a way that I think it's interesting because the younger generation of quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, when you ask them a question, they answer the question. And I know that sounds very simple, but there was a whole generation of maybe, that want to be sensitive here, but maybe Tom Brady clones where they saw Tom, wasn't given a lot, and the generation below him wanted to emulate that. Kind of feel like this generation, they just answer the question. So I agree with you. I'm not going to get tired of Burrow because I just think he's just a straight shooter. Not a lot of BS there. I love this Bengals team, but I also love this Titans team. I wish these teams weren't playing this week. I think Burrow is especially a young quarterback as there's in this league. There were so many people around him who had spent time with him at the college level or the pro level, Tom, where they said Burrow's better than Herbert, even when it looked like it was a blowout. And the reason they said that was because of the intangibles. They knew that this sort of thing would happen, and they hadn't seen it from Herbert, right? But the Titans have built an incredible culture and an incredible structure, and no excuses culture that reminds me a bit of New England. They had 112 games missed by their skill guys this year via injury, and it didn't matter. And they'll get Derrick Henry back, which I know the analytics guys hate that, but people don't want to tackle Derrick Henry in January. Nope. I don't want to tackle Derrick Henry in January. So I'm going to go with the Titans close, but I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if either of these teams won. But I don't want to dismiss the Titans because I'm hugely respectful of what Mike Vrabel's built down there.
And it's funny because when you look at the 4 teams, the Titans are probably the most solidly built in terms of meat and potatoes.
Yep.
But people prefer the other 3 teams. So let's hit the other 2 AFC teams, the Bills and the Chiefs. Josh Allen was, I mean, that was you're a basketball fan. I'm a huge basketball fan. That was everybody get out of my way. And he's done it twice against the Patriots. That was every shot's going in. Can he do it again? I don't like the way Patrick Mahomes is playing. I don't care about the final score against Pittsburgh. I think he is continually regressing and making some really weird decisions that he's getting away with. I think that in this game, Buffalo is going to continue on.
I think the Chiefs win.
Okay.
I think the Chiefs have edges at a couple of different places. Andy Reid is a better coach than John McDermott. I think the world of John McDermott. But I think Mahomes, I think there's a playoff version of Mahomes that is special. And I think that he needs to get a little more in rhythm. I still think he's adjusting, something we talked about, he and I talked about in August, but I still think he's adjusting a little bit to the reality after he played that game in Tampa Bay last year. I think when you go through that and you get hit so much and you don't trust your offensive line, that there's always going to be an adjustment. You're always going to see ghosts a little bit, even if you're the best quarterback in football. And so I think playing behind that line has been an adjustment for him. Our friend Nick Wright had a take the other day that the line has played so well that it has forced Mahomes to be a more normal quarterback. And that's why he's making some of the decisions that he has. I think that's pretty interesting. But this is a new reality for him. The guys are keeping him upright. And so he's not doing those crazy scrambles anymore, but I think that might end up being a good thing for him. I'm picking the Chiefs in this game only because the path for the Bills, and it's a realistic path, but it's low percentage, which is that Josh Allen plays like he did last week for 4 straight games. And I think that ends this week.
All right. Niners, Packers.
I'm going Packers. I think LaFleur and Shanahan are just as good of coaches. Aaron Rodgers is the advantage. Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan tried to give that game away against Dallas. And the Mike McCarthy decision-making really bailed out that offense. They played conservative. They made some head-scratching decisions. They made mistakes. The Trent Williams motion thing was insane. Garoppolo is going to implode at some point, even if it's for 5 minutes, and Aaron Rodgers is not. That's the difference in this game.
And the last one, I think, is, to me, unfortunately for young Tom Brady, he is going to be battered and buffeted by the strong winds of the Rams pass rush. And I look at the Rams going in there and just pinning their ears back and having one of those days where they can run away and hide if they get a lead.
You're going to want a healthy Tristan Wirfs. I'll say that much, because he was injured last week, and Ryan Kerrigan had a throwback game, which is not a good sign. I was on a Washington radio this week, and they were like, "Oh, Ryan Kerrigan's getting sacked. That can't be good." This is not the kind of team a 44-year-old Tom Brady wants to go against when there's questions about the offensive line's health. Okay, I don't know what that looks like. There's probably a reason Bruce Arians said these guys have to play through injury. And a year after having the best injury luck in football, we see a roster that's getting depleted. The Chris Godwin injury was massive. Losing Antonio Brown became massive because everything else. This is going to be a two-man game. This is going to be Tom Brady trying to find Gronk, and if not that, Cameron Brate. The receiving depth is just not what it was. They're going to have to go tight ends. They're going to have to go with the running game, throwing to the running back, something that Tom Brady's comfortable with. But I would not be surprised. I'm with you. I would not be surprised if Tom Brady's picking himself off the turf for all of Sunday, and this is a close game. And I would not be surprised if the Rams won.
Rams, Packers, Chiefs, Titans, Kevin Clark from The Ringer, really doing a great job for us today. We really appreciate it. And enjoy the games, and hope to talk to you soon. You know we love to lean on you.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.